Hey team, good morning. I wanted to go over a question I was recently asked, and that was kind of like, what was my routine going into when I was at my peak shape running a 219 marathon? The question is, when you were in all-time PB shape for the marathon, did you do any complete weeks of running 1 or 2 years, 1 or 2 a years? I'm a 240 marathoner with the goal of breaking 2 hours and 30 minutes, and I struggle so much. Takes more than one day off once in a while. Started running 3 years ago and never make a break in my training. Fear of losing time, I guess. One thing I want you to remember as you're training, and one, congratulations on having run a 240 marathon. That is extremely tough. And it's hard to duplicate that. It's hard to go out and run that quick, and you're going for a 230 marathon. So, I mean, huge congratulations to you. You're already very successful in what you're doing. I think that to make that big jump, you're going to have to train more strategically and smarter. And don't feel like you have to run 7 days a week in order to go from 240 to 230. There are runners out there that are doing this that are running 4 days a week or maybe 5 days a week. Don't feel like, and I understand your concern here. You said fear of losing time, I guess. I think it's normal when you're already very driven and excited about what you're doing to do less. Okay, and I always preach this philosophy, and it was taught to me, of working smarter rather than harder. Think about leverage. How can I get better results by doing less rather than more? And I think a lot of times we're trained so heavily on working hard that we don't all necessarily always know how to really train smart. Okay, and yes, there were times over the years prior to running 219 where I was running between 6 and 7 days a week. In fact, I was running between 6 and 7 days a week, even when I was in high school. So it was just several years of buildup. But I failed so many times over the years too. I don't want to. I think it's really important also to share on my videos, and they're not always going to be. The things I say are not always going to be agreed upon. Of course, we all have our own opinions, and there's going to be some people that think, as I mentioned on my past two short videos regarding what elite running is and what my ideas of elite running is. Everybody's got their own viewpoint, and some folks will say, no, 250 is not elite, 215 is not elite, 206 is elite, 204 is elite. We all have those different viewpoints, but I think that for a lot of athletes, they feel like you need to be running 6 to 7 days a week in order to run to make these jumps like you're talking about, going from a 240 marathon down to 230. You're running at a level very few runners get to. And yes, in general, over the years of what I've seen and what I've done, you need to be running a minimum of 4 days a week. But in most cases, most runners that have run these types of times are running anywhere from 5 to 7 days a week. That being said, if you're going to be running 7 days a week, make sure you are jogging on your easy days. Slow down, okay? I've seen my nephew run some phenomenal times himself and him saying too. He mentioned to me, I am slowing down a little bit on my easy days and recovering. He's dropped a 14:22 5,000 on the track, ran a 1:12 half marathon in his debut. Extremely tough runner. And I've seen other beginner athletes that are just starting off in the sport, who have this mindset of gradual increases in duration of time in training, and also gradual days per week that they're running. You have to first build up running 3 days a week, 4 days a week, then moving up to 5 to 7 days a week. But I do think, just answering your question, when I was in my all-time PB shape for the marathon, did I do any complete weeks of running 1 or 2 a year? I did that several times over the years. Yes, I ran 7 days per week for several years. I don't know if, a lot of runners don't necessarily always know my background, but you're free to check out the About page on RunDreamAchieve.com. But I started running marathons in 2002. The New York City Marathon was my debut in 2002. It was for a charity. We were starting in last place. And so I got the experience of what it felt like to run a marathon, even despite not being able to start the race until every runner had crossed the start line. That was interesting, to say the least. But it's a gradual process. I mean, it took me from running from 1992 all the way up to 2007 to set my personal best for the marathon. Okay, so you have to have a long-term approach in what you're doing. And in your case, regarding this question, I mean, you're already running, in my opinion, elite or very near elite times already. And certainly when you get below 2:30 for the marathon, you're in a very small group of runners that achieve that particular type of time. Okay, but I don't think don't feel like you're losing time if you're not running, if you're taking a couple days off per week or 1 day off per week, or you're running 7 days a week. If you want to run 7 days a week continually over several periods of time, several months, several years, you can do that, but make sure that you're slowing down on those easy days so that you can continue to not only adapt to what you're doing, but not lose the enthusiasm for what you're doing as well. Because it's very, very easy, especially when you're going after the types of times you're going for, and for runners that are trying to maybe break 5 hours for the marathon or 4 hours for the marathon. This isn't an easy process for any of us. I don't care if you're elite level athletes, your national class, your regional class, you're a beginner. This event takes so much time and effort. And in most cases, and I've said this in other videos, I know it's not the best answer that a lot of runners want to hear, but in most cases, in some cases, I should say, it may take you over a decade of training to get to the point where you're in that flow state and where everything lines up and you run the most incredible race you've ever run in your life, that it's just not something you're going to be able to duplicate again. Maybe you can. There are runners out there that do it. But, that was kind of the case for me. When I PR'd and ran 2:19, I trained for another decade to improve upon that. And the closest I could get was 2 hours and 26 minutes. Okay? So, I in answering your question, yes, I did have several years of running mostly 6 to 7 days a week. And again, that started pretty early for me. I started running in 1992 when I was 15 years old. And I was running, even when I was a freshman, I was running in general around 5 to 6 days a week. And then as I learned what I had to do in order to get to the next level in running, and just studying what the other better runners than I was running at, what they were doing, I could see they were running a minimum of around five days a week. And in most cases, and some of the top runners were running even more. But I just want runners, and not only you, but anybody that's watching this video, always think, what can I do to get the results, but how can I train smarter and not harder? If you can go out and you can train and run 3 to 4 days a week and get the same results as other runners that are having to run 5 to 7 days a week, kudos to you. I mean, it's awesome. And there's other athletes out there that do it. And certainly we all have different physiological capabilities. We all have, there's runners that have an enormous amount of genetic capability. They produce a very small amount of lactic acid when they're running at very high intensities when they race or when they run. And then there's other athletes, I'm an example, that produce a higher amount of lactic acid when they're running at faster paces and are not as naturally genetically gifted, that may have to spend several more years in order to get the same results that somebody maybe that's a little bit more talented will get in maybe 1 to 2 years. It may take, an example, a runner like myself, another 5 to 6 years versus 1 to 2 years of somebody else. So it's really about just being patient with what you're doing, and not overanalyzing, not overthinking. I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying in general. You mentioned here fear of losing time, I guess. Don't feel that way, man. Don't feel like you're losing time. It's just stay consistent with what you're doing. And again, if you can get the results, and you can, there's other athletes who can do it, so why can't you, that are running 4 to 5 days a week versus having to run 7 days a week? I mean, if you can get better results on running 4 to 5 days a week and feel more rested and more recovered as you're training, and have a better, more enjoyable process through the training block, that's the way to go, rather than feeling, just stressed out and fatigued and tired, thinking about, well, I gotta hold my mileage at this specific volume for this amount of time or I'm gonna fail. Okay, if again, in your case, you're getting to a realm of running that so few runners get to. You're at 240 right now, you're aiming to run under 230. What I've seen from runners at that level, they're doing an enormous amount of work. Okay, and even more so, I've seen athletes that kind of rely a little bit more on their genetic talent. They do work hard, but they know they can get by a little bit more with their genetic capability. And then there's runners that just know, hey, I have to be running 6 to 7 days a week in order to get to that level. Okay, but it's not a smooth process. It's a process you have to be patient with. And just speaking from my own background, I dealt with so many failures prior to getting to 219. We all love to talk about our successes, but let me tell you, I dealt with a lot of failures along the way. And that's why I try to convey to runners, I may not always say the perfect things in videos, but I try to convey to runners that I want to relate to how you're feeling as well. I can relate to what it feels like to put in 16, 24-week blocks and still miss my goal. But it's that persistence. It's that drive and motivation to continue to put in the work regardless of what it is. I don't care if it's racing, business related, you want to be a better personal public speaker, you want to, whatever it is, you want to get over a phobia, something, you want to lose weight, whatever it is, if you're persistent enough and you're willing to commit, you're willing to believe in delayed gratification and put in the work long enough, you're going to eventually get to what you want to do. In your case, you have the drive. You've already run a 240. To drop another 10 minutes, it may take you another 2 years. It may take you another 10 years. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It's the matter is, did you get to 229.59 or not? And you could quit right now and have run a time that so many runners around the world would love to have. So remind yourself of just how blessed you are to have already run a 240 marathon and going for a sub 230. And the fact that you've run a 240 tells me without a doubt in my mind that you can drop another 10 minutes off this time. Okay. Hope this answers your question. If any of you have any other questions or concerns, feel free to leave me a comment below in the description. Check out the resources below or on RunDreamAchieve.com. I wish you guys and gals all the very best in your training. And to you that asked the question, I really wish you the very best in your build-up. Again, it's impressive that you ran a 240 marathon. That is an extremely tough competitive time. So wish you all the best in going after that 229.59. I know you can get it.